Today is Friday, February 17th, 2012. We're in Lawton, Oklahoma, interviewing June and Allan Barrington. We're here on the Lowry Family Farm, and this project is part of our Oklahoma Centennial Farm Families Oral History Project, part of the Oklahoma State University Library Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it. Well, we're going to start with you, June, and I'm going to ask you how your family came to Oklahoma and came to settle right here.
Well, now that I didn't tell you this before, but whenever my great-grandfather and grandmother, on my grandfather's side, on my mother's side, I mean, if you go, but anyway, why we're here, they lived in Illinois, and they had a farm in Illinois. And my great-grandfather kept hearing about how wonderful it was in Oklahoma. And so one day he just up and sells the family farm in Illinois and goes in and says, we're going to Oklahoma. And they get on, they sell their things and put their belongings on the train and come to Lawton, Oklahoma. And because this is supposed to be the land of lush farms and everything, milk and honey, but they get here, and of course the lottery has already been, a man named Beauregard had drawn this farm, but they had of course sold the farms in Illinois, so they were looking for something comparable to what they had there, but as far as this, they chose this place because of the low land and the way that you know, in those days you wanted low land because it grew wheat and things better, because so they chose this farm and bought it from Mr. Beauregard. Now that was my great grandfather that did that, and of course my grandfather came with them, but he wasn't married at the time, and so then they came and he went back and married my grandmother and brought her out here, and they settled here, and that was the way they came to Oklahoma. And that was pretty brief, but I mean, there's much more story about it. But that's pretty much it.
Now, on the Beauregard land, was there any structures, any homes?
Not that I know of. I don't know of anything that was here. That they built there's 4 rooms there and an upstairs. That was the original, and then I just discovered myself that these 2 rooms were added on later onto the original, but I didn't know that, and then that was also added on, but that was before I knew anything about these. But my Aunt Mary Sue kept telling me that this was added on, and I kept telling her, no, it's not, because I thought she was confused. But then I went upstairs, and I could see then where the original siding was on the original house up there, in this room that's over this. And so those 4 rooms in the upstairs were the original part. But I do not know who built them. I'm assuming that my great-grandfather and grandmother did.
And when they came to Oklahoma and they started to settle on the land, early crops, what were they growing?
Well, I guess
I ran through the books. They had wheat. They had corn. They had a lot of oats for the cattle.
And they did milk.
And they milked. That's how we got our foothold on this place. I remember the dairy. I was very young when they sold it, but the dairy was what kept them rolling.
Mm-hmm.
So there was the dairy farm down here, and that's not the original one.
The original was sitting out north.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a lot of alfalfa for those dairy cattle. They seemed to feed a lot of oats and alfalfa to those dairy cattle. And it wasn't Holsteins, it was short ones, dual purpose cattle, where they could actually, they raise beef and milk the cows. So.
Hmm.
The Shorthorns is what put this place on the map. Because I'm a cattleman, that's where my base of study is. And the Shorthorns are what put this place on the map, like I said.
He has Angus. And he's got good ones. His boys do a lot of showing around the state, and have done, taken lots
We've
of
put a
time.
lot of cattle in your feed out up there and done very well.
Mhm.
So,
Well, in the early days, can you talk outside of the house, the farmhouse, some of the other early structures that you could recall?
Well, the chicken house, it's always been there as far as I can remember, way back and my grandmother had it. And then there was, that's still here. Now, they tore down the brooder house. I don't know, Wesley did that. I don't know how come. You probably
I
helped
know
him.
exactly why they were tore it down.
But then,
Tractor seemed to go through it.
and then there's still what they called the smokehouse. I don't remember it as anything but just a place where they put wheat and things. But that's that little house out there, and it's still there. And like he said, and then this house down here has been there as long, but it's been remodeled and done some different things too. It's always been there. Like he said, the old barn was moved to the back, but it doesn't resemble much of the way it was whenever they milked in it to start. But it was moved back behind the horse barn, and the horse barn has been there, and that's the red barn back there. And then this Smith place, the Smith barn as we call it, has been there as far back as
The calving shed's on the west. They used to put the cows in the calf.
and that was those have been there since the year 1, I guess. And now this barn out here was built in about 1940 maybe. It's out to the
Big red barn. It's still got the old hay grapple in the top of it that they used to unload haystacks. I would not let anybody tear that down. I threw a fit on that because that is still there, and the old tractor runs on it.
They used to put the haystack out there to the
Mm-hmm.
south of it.
And why is the one called the Smith House?
There used to be a shed up on, a mile and a half west of here that my great-grandfather purchased. And the barn was in good shape, and he didn't like it up there. So they tore it all down, rebuilt it right back here.
Moved it back here and called it Smith barn.
Smith shed's what they call it. And it had granaries in it and everything, and they rebuilt those pretty much like it was original. And of course it was tinned later on, but I remember that shed.
Yeah, well, they didn't, in those days, when they moved that, they didn't have things like these metal granaries and things like that, so they're still
They built the shed, they built the granaries and everything.
themselves. And this one down here has the loft and everything in it, I guess.
Yeah, it still does.
And I used to climb up in there and, yeah, so.
When you, in the winter, whenever I was growing up over here, that's where they kept the cows that are fixing to come fresh, have a calf. They put them down in that red barn due to the fact that it was insulated up top, and the heat from the cattle coming up reflect that heat back down, and the calves wouldn't die.
My grandpa would have his cow-calf operation over there in that where he would, the dairy, they would milk, after a while, but when the calves came in, he would feed the calves and the cows over
On the other
there
side.
on the other side, so it was. And they even had, when I was a little girl, before his time, they had a team of horses that they always hooked to the. Did you ever see the horses?
I'll take the fifth on that.
I didn't know whether he ever knew the. But
Yeah,
anyway,
like to get around
he had a good. Grandpa had a good set of horses, and he took them to the hay wagon, and he used that for a long time. just to haul wheat and hay around in. But it's been, we've been around here for quite a while.
Well, back in the early day of the milking operation, how many cows are we talking about?
Oh, I'm sure that they would.
I've got that on a DVD, I'm not
I'm
sure.
not, did you have a DVD on that?
Yeah, I think I do.
So, but,
I think it wasn't very many.
Mhm.
I think around 50 or 60,
Mhm.
if I remember right. I
I'm
remember
sure that they
64.
would milk. And he had a hand then that would milk, you know.
They brought
Dairy
in
hand.
outside help,
Mhm.
just outside of family.
Yeah, of course, in the beginning it was family
Mm-hmm.
and doing the stripping.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember that part, but they did. I only remember the milkers.
Mm-hmm.
And they were so progressive. The way I remember it was that they had a Delco. We called it a Delco. Of course, it was just a generator, but they had a stack of batteries that was all over it. It's in this house that is just about to fall down now. And they used that in that old barn, and they had electric milkers. And that was, and of course, they progressed on, but to the, onto the electrification, rural electrification at the time. But yeah, they had their own. Do you remember those batteries?
I can remember Grandma was talking about that set of horses too.
Uh-huh.
I remember when I was a little bitty kid, I guess 3 or 4, he'd bring those horses up on Sundays. And his old forge is still down here. He still got his old forge. It's in that old.
Oh.
He would shoot those horses himself. And he was, I don't know how old he was then. Because he lived.
He was 94 when he passed away. So.
And up until the day he died, he had his cows.
Hmm.
But he's got cattle right down here right now. I have one.
The
But he's
short
got-
ones have not left. And I made a vow that will never happen.
I have kept the short horns and he's helped me keep them, but we keep just a remnant herd on those.
At what point did your family always continue with the dairy operation? At what point did they get out of it?
I don't remember when it happened. But it was
They got
so-
out of it in, they were always as far back till they came, when they came here, yes, it was cattle and farm up until 1960, 62, I think it was. Yeah, 62. Or 61. No, he sold out in 61. My grandpa sold out in 61. Sold the dairy cattle, and
And what was the reasoning behind that?
there was no longer. They were just at that point in time
Getting older.
They were older, and then Wesley and Mary Sue came to live here, and moved in with them.
Mm-hmm.
And Wesley wasn't really interested in keeping the dairy going. As best I know about it, my father had the Shorthorns, but he was teaching too, and he didn't have facilities, and he really wasn't able to do that either. So just kind of lost interest in the dairy. Because it's a demanding thing. That's 24/7 if you want to say it that way.
And then at that point, did the family decide to venture into other types of livestock or
Well, Wesley,
cattle with less maintenance?
Wesley, my dad kept the Shorthorn,
Okay.
and my dad had the Shorthorn, but now it wasn't on this farm.
Mhm.
I mean, but we kept the Shorthorns.
Okay.
We've got them, like he said, I've got just, how many cattle over there right now? About 20 head of mama cows over
There's
there.
30.
30 cows of Shorthorns over on one of the farms west of here.
Okay.
And then I have some up at the house. I have 5 4 heifers up at the house that are shorthorn. And of course they're bred right now to Angus, but
They're not either.
well, partially. Wolfie is part Angus.
He's at the half Angus.
He's half and half. And then, but they're here. But then to get back to your, they ventured out into the beef Angus cattle.
Okay.
So
And how, over time, has the crops changed?
Because everybody in this operation has had a job outside of this the operation itself.
Okay.
Most of them were school teachers. I worked for Goodyear Tire and Rubber for 27 years. Everybody had outside income because we could take, and what the easiest thing was to do back to this day is wheat and cattle. They run simultaneously and you don't have to, it's not as time consuming. And well, of course we have our hay crops, but we're not as tied up in the production side of agriculture. We're more in the beef side of agriculture. And that is because we were all outside working, bringing in extra income. That was the best way to do it. And that's what has changed from going to having to make everything off the land to everybody. Well, what's funny about this, well, I laugh at this because we're the most highly educated agricultural people you'll ever meet. Every one of us in the family has a degree. And it helps us as far as the research and stuff on what problems are, where we can turn a corner to make it profitable. And when I have a problem with, Mom's got her master's in microbiology. If I have a problem there, I always turn to her, and I'm basically the animal scientist doing all that. And my son's an agronomist, and so we all try to coincide and work together, and that's what makes this work.
and Cody has his degree from Cameron. That's with his son. Now Justin is the one that lives out here, and my other son is a pharmacist, and so, but he doesn't do any farm work. Now he says he'd like to, but he's in Tulsa, so that's a far piece.
He comes in and tells us how to do it.
So June, when you were a little girl, did you spend much time on this
Yes.
property?
Yes.
And would you have chores?
I was busy trying to just keep out everybody's way because I'm an only child and only grandchild. And so I was just, wherever anybody happened to be going, like if they were going to go to the field and take somebody back to the field, I hitched a ride and went with them, you know, at 5 years old or whatever. And yes, my chores were like going to the garden in those days. And I thought my grandmother was going to plant the world in peas. we had to pick peas, and we dug potatoes, and there was a peach orchard out here my grandfather had, and that was that. Did you ever see any peaches trees out there?
Just a few.
But there were things in those days we canned, and we.
There's still some old stuff down in the cellar that they canned back years ago.
That was what we did, and so that was, and that kind of thing is what around the house. But I was always tromping around with whoever happened to be going to. I can remember walking out here always in the summertime, and my feet, I would go barefooted, and it would be so hot, and I'd have to run across the chat, you know, because, and but yes, I spent every summer here, and up until I started school, and I went to school at Chattanooga because my dad was superintendent in Chattanooga, and then every weekend here. So this is pretty much where I grew up.
So you remember any of the days before electricity?
No.
No, they always had electricity.
They always had electricity.
Okay.
And I don't know that Mary Sue would.
Okay.
Because I think that she, like I told you, they got the Delco.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so they, but I remember when they got their first refrigerator,
Mm.
it was a propane or butane, and I can remember that there was a flame underneath that kept burning on constantly to keep it,
It's cool.
making it cold, because before that they had just a regular old ice box and it sat over here. And we'd bring, my grandmother would go down and she'd pick up ice and bring it home, and like you get 100 pounds of ice and put it in the ice box, and that's what it was.
And indoor plumbing?
As far as I remember, they've always had this bathroom, but there was no toilet in it because in those days they didn't. There were outdoor toilets most everywhere.
Prairie, we used to sit right out there
Yeah. But,
between the brooder house and the chicken house.
and what's interesting that I tell the boys, of course it was Depression child, you know how that goes. But I remember they thought that they needed, I remember one time, my grandmother decided they needed to have a new toilet. And so somewhere she went, and I don't know where, they told them that we needed, and so they sent the WPA boys out and dug and filled this one up and got a new one.
Mhm.
And now that I remember that, because I don't know why I was so impressed with that, but I was.
One seater or two?
It was one I saw out there.
It's just the one, but that was.
And I remember as a kid, being nosy, they'd take on the north side if there was newspaper stuff in every crack that I could see.
But that's all I can remember that. And always, everybody knew what the Sears and Roebuck catalog had in it. But that's, but as what I started to say about this bathroom, it had a tub from what I remember, the regular bathtub, the old-fashioned kind, with the legs, and a lavatory, and that was pretty modern for the day.
What was the water source? Was there a water source?
Windmill.
The windmill? Okay.
That was, and everybody around came to get water from around because it was a good source. They came and they would come with milk cans to get their water across the road, and that's how they got their water, and it was pumped here. And there was always a sink there, as best I guess that's when they added this, and I didn't know, that was before my day on that, because there was a sink.
And where were holidays? If you were
Here.
you'd come to the farm here.
There was always, when school was out of Chattanooga, they had a house there. They stayed during the week, but it was always back here for the holidays and whatever else. Because my dad came and he worked here. And that was they were hands. That is to let you know somebody's come on the place.
Oh, that's good.
Unless you know how to get in here without it.
Well, and they're doing that, and sometimes that's not good. They're coming in. That's how he came in, was the back way.
So it went off when we came in?
Mm-hmm.
That beats the dog barking. Well, Allan, as a young man, you spend some time up here on the farm?
Every summer.
Every summer?
Kept me out of trouble.
And what would you end up doing on your summers?
You name it. Fix fence, drive tractors.
He made a hand too, just like I was saying, they worked on the farm. Oh, that's
Get cattle up. When I'd come, it seems like they'd save every calf they got until I got out of school. And
that's the next
And now, and basically, they would pull all the cattle in and work them in. And just separate them, which ones we're gonna sell, whatever. There was never a dull moment here. If you ate at this table, you're expected to pay your part. That's the way I was brought up.
And do you have siblings?
I had one brother,
Mm-hmm.
and he had allergies so bad, he'd come over here and he'd try.
Mm-hmm.
But during harvest time, he would just literally, his face would swell and he couldn't breathe.
That's the one the farmers.
He just couldn't hold it.
Mm.
And, but he tried, and he still has a fond memory for this place. He really does, because this is home.
You remember the first tractor you ever fired up?
Yes, I do. Model R John Deere, and I hated that thing because I guess I was 11, and it did not have power steering. And I learned how to use my feet, my hands, and body just to turn that thing. But as time went on, we got the newer ones, the 4020s, and learned to bale hay, learned to rake hay, learned to plow real good. And then as time went on, during harvest, that was the thing about it. After harvest was a big time of year for us. My job was to fill the granaries. And it seemed like those trucks had never stopped. And I remember I guess I was 13 then. And I learned how to back those trucks and unload them myself. And while the guys came in and ate supper and go back to the field. Is there any way we can disconnect that?
No, I don't know how. I've got everything else that did, but I don't know how to do that one.
But
Because they don't stuff.
like I say, I remember that was
Oh, that was the male lady. Yeah, she's in and out.
but I remember the guys would come in, I'd unload them, they'd come in and eat. They'd take the truck back, and then I'd come in and eat while they were loading, then I'd go back out. And at one time there was granaries all down that side, and they put oats. Oats is what I hated, and that's what got my brother sick. And the barley was the next two, and the wheat for the next year's plant was the next two.
See, he came over and my uncle Mary Sue's husband, and my dad, he would be their flunky pretty much, and they keep him going. And after all, it'd be his granddad, see. So.
Well, I will say this, learning how to dodge big cows gave me some athletic ability that I was able to capitalize on later in life. And, I always had the fortunate opportunity to play college football when I was grown a little bit more older. And those cows were nothing compared to those big guys.
Where'd you end up playing?
I played at Cameron.
Okay.
They had football teams then, they don't now, but.
That's where I found out that, you may be the biggest guy in high school, and you got to college, it's a different ballgame. Those guys were out for blood.
But now Quentin was my husband, his dad, and he had a pretty agriculture background too, so it kept it in the family. See, he had a degree in forestry from Auburn University, and so he was out there showing, keeping his boys in the agriculture field too.
One thing about it, I remember Dad teaching me how to craft pecan trees.
Mm.
And down here on this creek, there is a pecan tree that I guess was there before you and Dad got married.
Oh, yeah. Oh, they
There
was
is
there
one down
before
there, it's
year
big around
one.
as this room.
Yeah.
And it is huge. And that is kind of where I kind of set that as our monolith. But now you talk about my days here. when I was younger, about 9 or 10, Wesley bought me a horse. And I remember he said, you need to learn where all these places are that we have. He saddled the horse up. I didn't know what he was doing. This was before daylight. Wesley got up for the chickens. Went down and saddled that horse and brought it up here to the house, tied it off, and he said, you need to find out every nook and cranny in this place. I kind of looked at him, threw my lunch, gave me a water bottle, and said, don't come home until dark. Now, you did what they said or you were in trouble. But I rode and found every place with this family home at that time. Found where the cows would hide and actually found cows that they'd been looking for that were dead. And I came in that night and he made me tell him what I'd found. And I was tired. I slept good that night. But I found out about Thornhill place up there where all the little nooks and crannies were in there, and found some coyotes, found some pups, things like that. I remember that day very well because they wanted me to know every inch of this place.
But yeah, that Thornhill, we was talking about that, but now that's connected to the airport now. We've had some city expansions that we have had to deal with.
This well was good up until 1984 when they put this dump in down here. This used to be the sweetest water. You could be thirsty, the hottest day of the year, go in that well house, kick that water on. You quench your thirst in about 2 drinks. That's it. Now this stuff is just as sour as it can be.
You know, Shauna, Shauna, I told you, was a Geronimo girl, and somebody down there told her, since she was here taking care of me, that she should drink water from that well because it was the best water you'd ever find anywhere. And I had to tell her, don't you do it, because it has been because of the dump one.
Well, we were going to ask you about that. We noticed that. What year did it go in?
68.
And was that a shock to you, or did y'all know? Or
there was meetings. There was township meetings about that at the old schoolhouse up here. Because I remember going to them. They tried to put an injunction in on it, and there was a big collection taken with that deal. And as I remember, they tried, but the city of Lawton just seemed like they had the ace in the hole.
Somehow they had gotten
And
without
they just
anybody's-
basically ever since have run over us in this area. There is no statute we have to work with or against them anyway, anyhow. We got it, we're gonna run over you, and that's the way their attitude is.
Mm.
And it's not that.
But anyway,
this is a sorry town, I'm sorry.
we just, no, you
They
need to edit that.
You can edit that, but I mean,
But we do need, it did.
we do need some good statutes against
But,
encroachment.
Have you
But it did
noticed?
mess the well up.
Have you noticed neighbors leaving because of it? Environment changing?
What
or-
we've noticed, and this is an honest, true fact, it's been documented. Our neighbor across the road got cancer. His son had cancer. We've got another neighbor up the road here that has got colon cancer. We're not sure about Wesley, but we think that he became very ill because of
The
this
contamination. Of water, really,
Mhm.
because we didn't know that, how it got contaminated before you really knew it.
And they've connected us to city water just to shut us up, basically. And I'm 2 miles west of that side of that dump. Matter of fact, my uncle owned the land they're now starting the new dump on. They just told him we're going to take it whether you want to or not.
Eminent domain.
And in the domain. That is the worst law this country ever has. Because they don't give you fair market value for it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether you That's what they told him, but, you know.
I was here when that went down.
So that.
I happened to be off work that day when they came and talked to me.
Bad news.
But this, where we're going now, we're trying to hold it all together. And it gets harder and harder every day. The places I have back over here on 82nd Street, if you look back north from that place, now houses are coming farther south. You can look 1.5 miles west and north. There's a whole subdivision up there, and you look back straight north, they're coming south just as fast as they can. And I was lucky enough to know my great-grandfather. And he said a long time ago, if they get too close, sell it all, but make them pay.
Well, anyway, we holding it together over 100 years now. So, in this place, and this has been the hub. And what worries me right now is, of course, he lives over to the west and has his place over there now. And then, of course, I'm at this point in time, and I'm not, here, and Mary Sue is here, but this one grandson is here, and hopefully he will, because we will be, we'll be keeping it, but it's not as well kept as it once was right now. And it's
Reason I'm laughing about that, I can remember great-grandpa. That walkway used to go all the way down to the milk house. And if there was rocks on it, he wanted them swept off. That was my job. I forgot about that one.
yeah, but it was, just not, but it may, because well, you can see, I mean, they had a big operation going, with the buildings and all.
Where would they sell their milk?
Well, like I think I told you earlier, when my grandmother first, they came here and they were milking their own cows and things like that, they had their own customers, and she did take them to town. But then after, I don't remember that, but I'm told that.
Mm-hmm.
But I can remember going with her to Fairmont Creamery to take the cans of milk after they got into, and there was the Fairmont Creamery here. Did you all know that? And because it is an
It's
old
still
building, and then there was several dairies around. Sullivan's had a dairy, and Horton's had a dairy, and they sold it to, there was what they call Fairmont Creamery. And I think, now you girls can look at that, but I think there was a kind of a corporation that was called Fairmont that maybe came out of the north. And it was to me though, at that time it was a big building, but it might not have been that big now. But it was a big operation for the time. And several dairies brought their milk in there. And people, in fact, I just, who was it that I just ran into that said that they had worked at that, it was Mr. Nix this morning. He said that his dad worked at the Fairmont Creamery, and how he had gone in there. You remember?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, his dad worked there. We don't know what made us talk about that. But anyway.
And were the chickens used for income, or was it just for personal?
No, chickens were used for income, yes. I mean, eggs. You sold eggs. Took them to the hatchery and sold your eggs. And we had hatcheries then, too. So, but I don't think there's a hatchery within 100 miles of here, is there? You girls might know that from OSU.
Yeah, a lot of the chicken production is.
It's to the Arkansas, that area.
Yeah, we've been to one one farm up in that area, and it was just right close to the border, and they preferred the Arkansas the cooperative extension agents over the Oklahoma extension agents because that's what they specialized in.
Yeah. They got to be egg factories in some instances, but yes, I mean, Grandma had, like I said.
She had 100 chickens at one time.
You know what a brooder house is?
No, I don't.
When I said about the brooder house? Well, see.
They used to hatch their own chickens here.
See, and then there was a brooder hood. And it would be warm, and in the winter, you get them sometime about now, I guess, the chickens, and then you would, at night you'd go out there, and I've done that with my grandmother, and push them, be sure that they got under the brooder to keep warm so they wouldn't freeze. And that's what you called the brooder, because it was just a heating unit that kept and it was a little house that kept the chickens in. And it wasn't fun to clean the chicken house nor the brooder house, but those were things you did.
Would you use the waste in the garden?
No, it went on the wheat field.
Wheat field? Okay.
We had, my grandpa had a spreader, we called it.
I ran that thing very well.
And you could put the waste in that and take it out, and it spread it out over the field. It had a wheel-like thing that.
I still got that.
Yeah, he does have that over there.
Allan, you seemed, even as a young boy, very taken with farming. Did you think that you wanted to be a farmer when you got older?
Where I was going, I was actually going into veterinary medicine.
Okay.
And that's because of what I learned here.
Mm-hmm.
And the year I graduated, I took the MCAT test. And that year they were not accepting anything but United States students, all across the United States. So at that point in time, I went ahead. Goodyear was just now opening over here. I was one of the first employees they hired. Stayed there for 27 years.
It was a good job, good living, so how you
And I was able to leave what I wanted to out there, the problem I had out there, come home and do what I wanted to.
Was it hard to balance the farming and a job outside the farm?
To start with, it was. But as time went on, I was able to adapt, and I had a lot of good support in different places that I really needed it. And of course, my younger boys came on. And they took to it like flies to honey. And both of them were pretty good hands now, but they grew into it. And my wife was she grew up on a farm. She kind of had an idea of what needed to be done. And then whenever we didn't do it right, we were told to redo it, and that's because of I was lucky I had Wesley and my grandfather, and they kept you on the straight and narrow. And if you made a mistake, they'd correct it, then tell you about it, or tell you, and then you go correct it. But at the time, I did not have any plans on I wanted to be a vet. And I was dealt different cards.
Mm-hmm.
So you take them and roll with them. But I did go back to University of Memphis, 4 years ago, after I retired from Goodyear. And I went and studied under Dr. Peter Elsden, who developed the embryo transfer at Colorado State University the year I graduated. Very, very knowledgeable man. And I went back there and learned how to do the embryo transfer, which we are utilizing in our operation today. And it can take you from being 10 years behind to be right up in the front running real easy. And I was offered a job to go to Dubai and do embryo transfer with camels. And Dr. Elsden called me on that one. I laughed and I said, "You gotta be kidding." He said, "No, your class is one of the best ones that I ever had." And that made me feel good because I was in there with 4 vets, one from Nebraska, one from University of Iowa State, and there was another one from Penn State. Then the guy that was in there with me, the same age as me, was over the dairy herd at University of Michigan, or Michigan State. So I was in a very elite group, and we all worked together, and I learned a lot. And Dr. Elson walked in the last day of the class, threw all these books on the table, and he said, "Now, if you went to the University of Memphis to get your master's, you can pay $10,000, just hand me what you owe me." But he was a good guy. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. And it's amazing how much things have not changed, but how fast the technology has jumped from what you learned when I was in school to what it is now. And if you don't stay on top of it, you're going to be behind.
So you're keeping up with the technology in your own operation today?
Yes. Matter of fact, I had the first embryo calf of last year. I put embryos in last year. The first ET calf hit the ground this morning. So this is number 46.
Wow.
So the technology, if it's out there, you better use it because you're going to get left behind.
Mm-hmm.
And like you meant, this is another to talk about the difference in years. I remember as a kid, there was very little fertilizer put down. It was all coming out of the chicken house or cow pens or whatever, spread out on these fields with manure spreader. Didn't ever take a soil test. Now, you take soil tests every year. It tells you what you need. But that's just the way things go. And you got satellite imagery right now. You can see where your crops are weak, where they're all strong. And back in, I know, just 1970, for instance, they just said, it looks good, and they wouldn't get out in the middle of the field and do the soil test or look at the crop, and then you go out there. It'd be great right around the edge, in the middle would be nothing. And now you've got the satellite imagery where you can actually see where your soil is weak and strong, and you can adapt the crops to do what you need to do.
And you have the weather.
Mm-hmm.
We've had, last summer was a scorcher that, well, people just didn't even get their cotton up around here. So, I mean, it just didn't sprout.
Did weather
It was because
hit you hard last year?
terrible.
Yeah, we were able to save our herds though. We had saved 3/4 of grass that we normally pasture at that time of year. And I held the cattle back on, just start rotating, moving them around where we could kind of get those 3/4. We had hay enough to get through. We're going to have hay enough this year to get through it.
It's, but if you realize right now our ponds are not full.
Mm-hmm.
So we really need rain to fill those ponds. We're not into it, but yeah, if we have the weather, and the way the technology is now, but they're not giving diesel and they're not giving fertilizer away right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's higher than a cat's back. You know that because if you gassed your cars up today.
Well, I got a price. We were going to fertilize. We put down the weed killer and spray for some bugs. Talked to the guy yesterday. $21.50 an acre.
And you realize that if you're going to fertilize 500 acres of wheat, what that's going to cost you, and that's before you harvest it, and that's all that goes into it. So what your price is going to need to be before you get that.
And that was a cheap one.
So you need other jobs.
Yeah.
Economics degree.
Yeah, that's what your degree is?
No, that's what you need.
Basically, yeah. Yeah. But I'm really sad you talk about that. I'm really sad that the agriculture industry right now is narrowing down. And I don't see many kids involved in it. And it's really sad because these people in the United States are going to need to eat. They haven't figured that out yet.
Do you think it's hard to be a a farmer with, smaller acreages?
I can say two things, yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
Being the smaller part of it, you can manage your things a lot easier. As whereas a big operation, you've got to hire X amount of people, and you're not going to be able to. You got to pay wages, you got to pay this, and plus you got your overhead.
Right.
If you can kind of keep it in the family where everybody gets a kind of a piece of the pie, it works better because you've trained them to know what to look for. And I wouldn't want to be, right now we're at 3,000 acres, we're small. I've got a neighbor that's got 10,500. His overhead is unbelievable, and I love him to death, but I can't see how he does it. But he is scrambling every day to make payments on, not make payments, but I mean, make ends meet.
Sure, yeah.
And Mom mentioned that everybody in this family has an outside job. It made it very easy for us to rob Peter to pay Paul sometimes. And now that where we're at, everything is paid for. And if you decide not to fertilize, so be it. You're not
Don't get much crop.
You're not going to get much crop, but your cattle on the other side of that picture can take it and use it and do a better job of harvesting it than you can.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to get paid in the long run in those cattle. So it's kind of a different operation.
Economically, right now, it is tough on the farmer, no kidding. I mean, as far as the expense and the equipment cost is prohibitive to buy. They don't give those tractors away. You know that. That's like buying a house and putting it out there.
You're not going to argue that point, are you?
Oh, no. Oh, no. I lost my train of thought, Tanya.
Well, I can go back and ask if they were involved with home demonstration clubs or.
My wife is.
Yeah, his wife should have come.
She's supposed to be here, but
She's held down, like he said, whenever he was at Goodyear, she helped with the boys with showing their cattle, and he too. I mean, it was a joint effort by everybody, but But now, as far as home demonstration clubs are concerned, those of us, like my mother and Mary Sue and I, all had jobs, so you didn't get into those clubs like the ladies that didn't, but my grandmother belonged.
And through the years, do you remember interactions with county agents?
Yes, I do, in 4-H Club.
Mm.
I was in 4-H Club, yeah. And we had our 4-H Club. In those days, we didn't have, in our small schools, we didn't have big clubs like the FFA like we do in some schools did, but Chattanooga didn't. So we had our club in there, and our home demonstration agent would come, and a county agent, and we'd have their meetings, and we had our meetings, the home demonstration. We'd have county meetings where they wear your dresses. What do we call those? I forgot.
They had the dress review.
Dress review, yeah. And we had your aprons, and we had all that as we progressed, and that's what we did. And then in the fall, you went to the county fair and took your canned goods, and always I won in my canned goods.
you did.
I did too. I packed a few jars. But yeah, and it would be the county fair. Yeah. That was before you were even a twinkle in my eye. But, yeah, we had all that.
Alan, do you have any interaction with county agents today, or
I
is it a
never,
s-
I never messed with the county agent. I always had, I was an affiliate of the Lawton FFA.
Mm.
And I never messed with the county agents. Now, I've been involved with them since here in Comanche County. I got a good one up here, Marty New. He's the one we take our soil samples to, and he's, his dad was an ag teacher whenever I was young. And I never could get into FFA in Duncan for one reason, because my cattle were in Comanche County, and I was in Stevens.
Mm.
And I was at Duncan High School. So, like I said, I became an honorary Lawton FFA student.
Well, I have to say, our FFA teacher over there, he was a pig man too. And I wasn't much into pigs.
But what I learned as far as integrity and honesty was learned through the guys that I went through when I traveled with them, and I was in with them all the time. And that was Marvin Bickett and my Uncle Wes. I saw deals made on a handshake that at this day and time you would never do. But that is where the deal I remember.
Well, I still, in Duncan, when I go over there, I still go to the county agents and get things that I want, and he's still got his office there. And I
A deal with a bunch of ranchers over in the eastern part of the state, and he had the bull that everybody wanted for some reason. And I was showing heifers out of that bull, and he had sent some out to 3 other kids. And he went to that show down there, and he won 2 divisions, 5 or 6 classes, and came back that next year. And I never saw the price of cattle go up like they did that year. But that's how my uncle made money with his cattle. He was a very good.
and that's Mary Sue's husband. He's
He
talking
was
about.
very good at putting
And he
deals
was here.
together. And
This is what he did.
and I will say this, I'm not as good as he was, and I never will be. But he knew how to play. I wish I did.
And he was a school teacher.
He was vice principal.
He was vice principal at Tomlinson. And like I told you earlier, he and Marvin Bickett, that's what they had they were good enough that they thought they were the best, that they named their school farm after them. So that was, and it's on the sign out there at the corner of Upley and Sheridan Road. So,
Well, looking into the next 100 years, what do you think will happen to this piece of land, your Centennial Farm right here?
well, we've discussed that from time to time, and Allan says, well, it will go on, and I worry because I see how things, I mentioned a while ago, I'm hoping that they get put back together, because you can see things falling apart, and it needs to have some work done on it. But he says it will stay. That's what we've talked about that. So that's, don't you have said that right? That's been pretty much it.
This place will stay the same.
Mm-hmm.
Now the others may change, but we're going to have to do a lot of rebuilding here, because 100 years of deterioration, and
And things have changed. I mean, that's like the house itself has changed.
you can hear this house, it needs some work done to it.
But And the chicken house out there, I hope it stays, but now my grandson, I told you was out here, he got chickens about 2 years ago. And I thought, well, maybe they would have chickens. But then, you have to take care of those chickens. And he wasn't too good about keeping the chickens cleaned
He
out.
didn't know how to do it.
He really didn't. And so there wasn't anybody around pretty much to. And then she told you that she had fallen over the hose, and that hose was at the chicken house, and she was out there, and so.
But she'd go out and take care of it.
So that's.
Well, there seems to be a strong emotional tie, family tie to this particular property, and
Well, there is. But time goes on.
it does.
This is home.
Mhm. Any words of wisdom passed down?
Don't ever put your land up for collateral. And that's the way we've operated.
That's been pretty much the
Don't ever put it up for
advice
collateral.
that was passed on down from it. Don't mortgage your land.
Mm-hmm.
You might mortgage other things, but don't mortgage.
Don't mortgage your land or your cattle, because they'll make you pay.
You haven't got much else to mortgage.
Unless you mortgage your soul, and I don't want to try that.
I don't know who you could talk to do that.
There's always an option somewhere.
But that's
Well,
been pretty much it. But I think we've
That was
pretty much
told,
said
what I just
everything
said
that there.
was told me by my great-grandfather and reiterated by my grandfather
mm-hmm.
many times.
And of course, my daddy, his grandfather, always said, just don't spend more than you make.
That's true.
That's kind of hard sometimes, but that was the big thing. Don't spend more than you make.
Very good advice. Well, is there anything else, any fond memories you'd like to share with us before we turn the recording off?
Well, of course, just having been brought up right here in the family, that's a fond memory. I mean, that you're right here, grandparents and parents, and that's no longer a thing. That's a thing of the past.
Alan, have you had your children get on a horse and find every nook and cranny on the place?
Uh-huh.
Well, not a horse maybe, but
Yeah, Justin owns horses. Justin's quite the roper, and I don't know where he got that from, but anyway, he was a roper, and he was at one time pretty well nationally ranked, and that's when things started changing here, because he got too many horses in here, and just horses are terrible at tearing things up. And both of my boys, they know where I used to hide stuff.
See, Justin is, like I said earlier, I'm an only child and only grandchild, and I was it as far as, and then my two boys, and then I have three grandsons, and 2 sons and no daughters, and it's just 2 daughter-in-laws, and Justin is the oldest grandson, and so he was the one that came and started, when he got to be of age, he moved out here into the little house, and that's how he kind of brought in the horses and things, and that's how he is. Then he got the mobile home, but so that he is the 6th generation of having lived here and has some livestock here.
Yeah. And Cody's actually bought himself a home in Lawton, in town.
Cody's his youngest son.
He is my youngest son, and I've partnered up with him on quite a few things, but to bring him along, get him back involved. But
Don't know how to turn out.
don't know how it's going to turn out because
Still young.
the two boys are as different as night and day.
And, you know, neither of them are married, and neither of them, so, you know, wives make a lot of difference in how things go. So you're,
I was lucky. I married a farm girl.
and she's been right there with him, so that makes a lot of difference.
One of my fondest memories, her and my grandpa. I laugh at that every time I think about it. I was working at Goodyear. I guess it was the first 2 years I was working out there, and I'd go from work from 7 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon. At 3 o'clock, I'd come home, get on the tractor, whatever I need to do. Well, she and my grandpa decided they were going to plow. I come home and I was dreading getting on that tractor because it was going to be a long, because I usually didn't get off till about 10 o'clock at night on the tractor. I come home and they had both tractors over there and they just a beam sitting in the gate. They'd finished that field and I went, thank God. And I remember that very well.
She'd get out there and work on the field. Well, I did too, but that's beside the point. Maybe.
Well, it's a family affair. It takes everybody to get it done.
Mhm.
I remember she had a good tan that summer.
Yeah, we worked, but, yeah.
And,
I know what, as far as, they put Justin, that's the grandson here, he learned how to drive the tractor when he was about 5. And we had those 14-foot plows. And if I were out plowing a 100-acre field over there, I was always so glad to see Justin come and we'd get through a lot faster.
yeah, Mom did. If Papa passed, you jumped on that tractor.
I did all that those years, and so the wheat while you worked.
I remember I'd come in and get the ground ready the night before and then you'd play.
So
You used to keep me jumping.
we
Is it terraced? Did they do
Oh,
terraces?
yes. And Justin learned how to plow terraces just like Mom did. And there had one field that I would mention, Jan and my grandfather had worked. There was 4 terraces in that field. And it started back on the southwest corner, and there was 20 acres in it, and there's the next one down, there's 35, and then the next one there's 60. You jump down the bottom one, I think there's 35. And I had just got the top terrace done the night before, and gotten in there and done that together. The rest of that, I hate plowing terraces. If you don't, your fields are going to wash away. We had I like to say that. And then one of my other fondest memories was the day I won classes down in Dallas that year with Wesley. I thought he was going to do handstands walking down the aisle with that calf.
But no, after those years after my dad passed away,
You talk about something changing.
I did. I sowed wheat every year there up until the boys and you got where you were able to take it over and plowed, and they always called my disc.
You did.
I disc, and they called my Dickie disc because that's what.
That's because of if you read, John Deere put a book out, had Corny the Corn Picker and Dickie Disc.
And I did, and I bought that 94 tractor, and we just,
We've all had a good time. We've been able to laugh at each other, and cry, and want to kick each other in the teeth. But it's family.
Mm-hmm. That's what it's about.
Is there anything else that you need to
I'm
know?
not going to say this one because it was very small.
What did I do?
I'm not going to say it.
Well, you can tell us when we turn it off.
No.
Well,
I'm sitting too close. She is my mother.
You're a good son. Well, we appreciate your time today. Thank you for just giving us a little bit of a glimpse of your life here on the farm. Thank you.